Undo that again.
Man, George Orwell has never looked more cringe than this. So, as you probably know, as of this video, there is a new adaptation of the George Orwell classic Animal Farm that has been released. And this time, this is actually an animated adaptation that is actually brought to us by Andy Serkis. And not only that, but it also features an all-star cast that features people like Seth Rogen, Glenn Close, Kieran Culkin, Woody Harrelson, and several others. And based on the reactions that people have so far, ever since the trailers were released online, oh boy, this looks like it's on track to be the next movie that everybody is going to love to hate. Safe to say that we all know that when there is a movie that people on the internet and especially on social media are just ready to go and just flat out destroy, they will be absolutely merciless to it. And I feel like in the case of Animal Farm, especially with the bad reception that it got with the trailers, I wouldn't be surprised if people are ready to go and release their videos and their reviews about how much they hate Animal Farm and how it is one of the worst animated features that we have gotten in recent years. But as for me, however, I'm gonna go and take a completely different approach to this animated adaptation of Animal Farm. To which I will not be bashing it or destroying it or hating it or anything like that. Now, you might think at this point that I'm gonna be a complete contrarian and I will go and tell you, well, no, Animal Farm is actually a really good movie. I think Andy Serkis did a great job with it. No. I am not gonna go and do any of that. Especially with the fact that, well, to be honest, I haven't seen the movie and I honestly have no interest in watching the movie. So in that regards, I cannot go and put my opinion onto the feature. And even though I actually am a fan of the original George Orwell novel, I am gonna go and completely skip it out, not necessarily because of the movie itself and that it's really bad. I mean, to be honest, a bad movie hasn't really stopped me from going to watch it and to go and make a review out of it. No, the reason why I'm actually boycotting it is mainly because of the distributor of this adaptation of Animal Farm, Angel Studios. And this is not the first time that I decided to go and completely skip out on an animated feature that was released by Angel Studios, regardless if they were the ones who directly produced it or if all they did was just distribute it. I've also done the same thing before with their other animated releases, such as King of Kings and with David, both of which were released back in 2025. And I just decided, you know what? No, I'm not going to acknowledge their existence, and I'm just going to completely skip out on just doing those reviews. And this will probably be the only time that I will go and fully address Angel Studios in a video. And it's mainly because I owe you all an explanation. Why is it that I'm not going to go and make a review on anything that was released by Angel Studios? And the main reason, if I could be honest with you all, I just cannot help but feel like they are an absolutely shady company. And I'm not just avoiding them because of just, oh, they give me bad vibes. It's not just that. We have seen in their recent history where it honestly feels like their Christian imagery is more so of a mask than something that is actually based on their actual principles and their actual moral values. In a way, they're kind of like the Christians that would actually give the religion a bad name when you look deep into a lot of their practices. And the biggest piece of evidence to that is in regards to the movie that made them a popular name, which is Sound of Freedom. Now, for those of you who may have forgotten, Sound of Freedom was a movie back released in the summer of 2023, and it was noted to be an indie film that really got a lot of attention and accumulated a lot of money at the box office. And it was said to be the movie, or at least the first one, that really made Angel Studios a recognizable distributor, and what really got them up there so that that they could go and be in the same leagues or be considered on par with some of the other major players such as Disney, Universal, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and so on and so forth. And whenever you hear people talk about Sound of Freedom today, it's mainly because it was the movie that made Angel Studios a recognizable name. Or should I say, it's the only reason why people would ever talk about Sound of Freedom today. Because if we actually do go and discuss about Sound of Freedom, it has actually gotten a lot of negative word of mouth from the majority of people, where most people who have actually seen it have actually stated that it's nothing more but a QAnon propaganda movie, where it tries to go and present itself as a true story that discusses about child trafficking and how one man was able to go and stop them. But many people, including child trafficking experts, have actually stated that it is obvious that a lot of what happened in reality has been heavily altered in order to go and enable QAnon conspiracy theories. And from there, it kind of became a little bit of a culture war kind of thing, where conservatives would go and not only use that to go and heavily enable those types of QAnon conspiracy theories, but at the same time, that they would also go and try to elevate that as like the ultimate conservative movie and a moment for them to go and celebrate because of how much of a success that it was at the box office. And yet, funny enough, the way that it became a box office success is actually another thing that became heavily controversial. Because you see, it's not just through the traditional means in which Sound of Freedom was able to go and get its money. It's actually because of a unique program that Angel Studios created called Pay It Forward, to which they would go and heavily encourage audiences so that they would keep buying tickets and that they would hand it over to strangers so that they could go and watch it for free because, well, the ticket is already bought. All they have to do is just bring their ticket to the movie theater so that they could go and watch the movie. And that right there caused even more controversy, where it showed that the Sound of Freedom's box office success is actually done by means where it feels very suspicious, where there have been accounts of people who would try to go and exploit that pay it forward system, where they would go and buy tickets in bulk so that they would go and rank up the money, basically overinflate the amount of money that the Sound of Freedom would go and get. In fact, there have been evidence and numerous of accounts where they would go and say that Sound of Freedom was immediately sold out in several theaters, and yet in those actual theaters themselves, there would be very few, or some movie theaters would legitimately be straight up empty, because it's more about inflating the numbers more so than actually people to go and see it. And it really does highlight that with the pay it forward system, there have been a lot more people who would buy tickets more so than people who actually went and see it. And if you want the biggest proof that this is actually the case, look at the Sound of Freedom now. Look at the amount of people who would actually go and talk about Sound of Freedom as a movie in itself, and you'll realize that it is virtually non-existent. And that's the thing that I always find to be so strange about Sound of Freedom. It's the fact that this is a movie that is often considered to be a box office smash hit, a huge phenomenon, in fact. Like, some people would even say that it's on par with the other movies released around that time, that it's on that level of a phenomenon, similar to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And yet it is so strange to see how a movie like that would become a big success at that time, and yet to this day, and as I'm recording this, by the way, it's only been 3 years since that movie was released, it left zero impact in pop culture. You see nobody, not even the conservatives who say that they love it, would go and actually talk about The Sound of Freedom as a movie. Like, they wouldn't go and talk about the quality of it. They wouldn't even discuss about the subject matters of it. They would discuss about literally nothing about it. And that's where it feels like, honestly, the success of Sound of Freedom kind of feels a little bit like a sham. I'm not saying that that they did some illegal things in order to do so. In a way, it kind of feels like Sound of Freedom kind of cheated its way onto success so that Angel Studios could become a recognizable name. And not to mention that with the subject matters that they would go and bring up and how a lot of that is heavily associated with QAnon conspiracy theories, it does make me wonder, like, okay, if you're going to go and distribute a movie like that, how does that relate to Christianity per se? Like, why is it that a Christian company would really be that interested in spreading stuff like this? Especially when Sound of Freedom has been noted to do more harm than actual good when it comes to the subject matter of child trafficking, where all it does is go and spread misinformation. But then again, some could argue that technically with what we do know now, it is a little bit more accurate if it's about calling out the Trump administration, considering what we know about Trump and what we know about those people in the Epstein files. But safe to say that I don't think that's necessarily the direction that they wanted to go with it. So yeah, it honestly just feels very off with Angel Studios' association with Sound of Freedom. So already, as I said before, that just feels like a very massive red flag right there. And that's not the only Angel Studios thing in which it got a red flag. There's also another project, an animated project also, that honestly doesn't have much to do with Christianity in the first place, but it honestly feels very off that they would be the ones to go and distribute it, and even nowadays is considered one of their biggest shows. And that is in regards to the Tuttle Twins. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Tuttle Twins is an animated series that is distributed by Angel Studios, to which it is based on a popular children's book, and their main goal is to go and educate kids about finance and economics, and even sometimes like other things to go and learn, such as history as well. But the big catch, however, is that with the Tuttle Twins, they actually have a very libertarian approach to it, like very right-leaning in terms of showing how economics work, a very conservative perspective of how history has been and stuff like that. And for people who have seen it, it really did leave a bad taste in their mouths, because basically with its libertarian approach, all it's doing is just teaching kids about apathy and how to be a selfish asshole in life. And this is not even to mention that because of that libertarian approach, you know that those financial advice that they would go and give out, at the very least, the grand majority of them, you know it is absolutely garbage. And one perfect example is that there actually was a recent episode that they put out in which they would go and educate kids about cryptocurrency. Like, they want to teach kids how to bring them into the world of crypto and Bitcoin and all that kind of garbage. And the crazy thing is that they actually put out that episode after the crypto bubble burst. So basically with the Tuttle Twins, they're setting children up for absolute failure. I can guarantee you that there's going to be plenty of libertarians in the future where they will look at their finances and they will see how much in critical debt that they are, in which they will never escape the lower class, and they'll wonder to themselves, why is it that I'm poor? Well, I mean, you could go and ask the Tuttle Twins about that. And I understand maybe those examples are not necessarily enough, and if you want to have more proof, then how about we go and talk about how Angel Studios has a long history of lawsuits, so much so that this even occurred even prior to the existence of Angel Studios itself. And when you do look upon their history of lawsuits and stuff like that, you could tell that this is a company that really does prioritize their faith more so than the law. And a great example is actually prior to the founding of Angel Studios, because before they were even called Angel Studios, they were a company called VidAngel. And what they offered was a streaming service in which Christians actually have the power to go and heavily filter out what they feel like is a bit too explicit for them. Like if they want to go and watch a family film, for example, then they can go and immediately mute or full on skip out any of the things that they deem to be heavily unchristian. But the problem with VidAngel is that it had absolutely no regard to copyright whatsoever. And because of that, VidAngel, or technically Angel Studios, has actually spent years in court against all the major companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount, and several others because of copyright infringement. Now, ultimately, they did go and settle that, but still, though, whenever they want to try to go and take action and try to put more emphasis on like Christian values, they don't necessarily really care about the law. Or on that note, they don't really even care much about the filmmakers themselves, because they've actually had a history of trying to screw over filmmakers and the people working on the projects that they made a deal with Angel Studios so that they can go and actually exploit them for their own personal gains. And one notable example is actually a recent animated movie that they put out is actually David, because there had been some copyright trouble where they wanted to go and screw over the company behind it, which I believe is Slingshot. And from there, they kept having like copyright troubles. They wanted to disassociate themselves with Angel Studios, but then eventually, of course, at the end, they did ultimately settle, which is why David was distributed by Angel Studios. But then there was also another project in which there was a lawsuit that happened, and Angel Studios ultimately got a big L on that one, which is the series The Chosen. Now, in the beginning of the 2010 decade, The Chosen was actually one of the biggest projects from Angel Studios. It was considered to be right up there with The Sound of Freedom as like one of the biggest names that helped propel Angel Studios up as the major company that we know today. However, during the time when they were working on season 4 or something like that, the people working on The Chosen decided to go and put up a lawsuit against Angel Studios because they want to completely disassociate with them, and they managed to do so. Now The Chosen has completely cut ties with Angel Studios, and now they're collaborating with Amazon in order to go and continue the series. So there have been times when their practices, yeah, they're able to go and work things out, but then they would end up screwing them over. But it really does highlight that their initial plans is to go and serve themselves more so than to actually go and help out the filmmakers who would go and create many of these Christian projects and stuff like that. So this is basically to go and highlight that with many of their business practices, and even with some of the things that they would go and distribute with stuff like Sound of Freedom or the Tuttle Twins, or even Animal Farm, for example, don't you think it's a little bit strange that a Christian company like Angel Studios would go and distribute a movie about Animal Farm? Like, you kind of wonder, like, what is it about the George Orwell novel? What does that have to do with Christianity or anything like that? Well, it highlights that Angel Studios is honestly a lot more of a conservative company than they are a Christian company. That basically, as I stated before, the Christianity aspect of it, the Christian image, is nothing more but a mask so that they could go and put out a lot of conservative propaganda, and some of which can be a little bit dangerous, where it can legitimately lean to some far-right propaganda, such as the case with Sound of Freedom, where it's about more spreading conspiracy theories more so than to call out actual child trafficking that's going on in the world. Or there is also the Tuttle Twins, where they would go and spread propaganda to children about libertarianism. Or even with Animal Farm, like, I feel like the only reason why Angel Studios would have any interest in distributing an Animal Farm movie is because Animal Farm is possibly the most well-known anti-communism story. And in the case of Angel Studios, you know that they have a lot more bad faith ideas about spreading anti-communism propaganda. Like, their definition is far more different than the historical context of what actually is communism. You know what I'm talking about. Basically, with Angel Studios, they would believe that communism is people of color having as much rights as whites. Or marriage is not exclusively for heterosexuals. Or whenever people would go and pray, it wouldn't be exclusively for Jesus. You know, the McCarthyism definition of what communism is. So that's why with Angel Studios, sure, they do put out a good amount of Christian media, but at the same time, I feel like they are far more categorized as a conservative company, more so than an actual Christian company. They're a lot more associated with something like the Daily Wire or Breitbart than anything like that, where their main goal feels like it's a lot more about not spreading Christianity, but more about spreading Christian nationalism, the more harmful kind of Christianity that actually causes a lot more problems than it actually does follow the words of Jesus Christ. And this is not even to mention, I tried looking up what is it about Angel Studios that they would do that is actually Christian than just preaching about the Bible and stuff like that through their media. Like, I tried to see if they would go and actually collaborate with nonprofit organizations, or if they have done some charity work and stuff like that, you know, basically to go and follow the words of Jesus and follow his leadership to go and actually help out others. And honestly, I haven't found much. Maybe there have been a few movies where they would go and collaborate with nonprofits in order to go and help out the causes based on the subject matter of the movie. Like, some people would probably go and argue that they have done that with The Sound of Freedom, where they would go and collaborate with nonprofits based on anti-child trafficking. But then again, however, considering The Sound of Freedom and the kind of movie that it is, where it's based more on conspiracy theories than to actually go and call out child trafficking, I wouldn't really trust them with that. But outside of that, though, no, there's not really much where they would go and show that with the millions of dollars that they would go and accumulate, you don't really see much of them that actually goes towards helping people, to actually go towards the good causes that actually does make Christianity useful. You don't see them helping out the poor and feeding them and giving them shelter. You don't see them giving immigrants sanctuary so that they can go and have a better life. And you don't really see them spreading any positive message that Jesus is very well known for spreading compassion, for spreading mercy, for spreading forgiveness, for spreading empathy, or anything like that. I mean, considering that they are more of a conservative conservative company, they would probably look at those things and they would just consider it woke. So when I see Angel Studios, I have nothing against them if they want to portray themselves as a Christian company. But if they want to be a Christian company, they better prove it by actually doing some Christian things. Show that you're using your Christianity for good. Because if all you're doing is just spreading out media, that's just preaching. And preaching alone is not necessarily enough to show that what you are doing with your religion is good. If anything, I kind of feel like, honestly, with that Christian imagery, Angel Studios is kind of getting away with so much more than they honestly should. Because if you're going to go and try to like call out or even just criticize anything that would be Christian related, what happens is that it immediately gets deflected back. And there are some people who would go and say that you're anti-Christian for questioning what they would do, because any action related to doing so for Jesus or doing so for God would automatically be considered good, which, as we all know, is kind of false. So yeah, I know that I am running the risk of criticizing Angel Studios and I'll be called out as anti-Christian of it, but I'm going to be honest with you all. People are already calling me that anyways. And since we're already on that subject, we might as well go and get into that. I might as well go and automatically address it, because this is something that I have actually seen been going around, where there have been a few people who try to go and call me out as anti-Christian, because I've actually had my fair share of actually criticizing things that are considered to be Christian, or especially calling out conservative Christians whenever they would use their Christianity in the absolute wrong ways. Now, at that point, this is honestly the one thing that I feel like whenever my friends or when people who do know me, when they saw that people would go and say that I'm anti-Christian, it would get the biggest laugh out of them, because they know for a fact that it is not true. And I'll say right now, no, I am not against Christianity in general. I actually do have some Christian friends, and sometimes we would get into the subject of religion and we would discuss about Christianity in more positive ways. In fact, there's one friend in which they would regularly go to church, and we would talk about like how things been in church and what they learn and what are some of the lessons that they would teach. And they would even share videos with me about those particular sermons, emphasizing about what they would learn and like what life lessons that they have gotten out of it. And I'm not going to lie, a lot of them are very fascinating. And I'll even add, just so you actually do learn a little bit about me, I was actually raised Catholic, and I've actually gone through some of those ceremonies where, yes, I actually did get my confirmation, and as a baby, I was actually baptized. So yes, I did actually have a little bit of history of being a Christian in my early years. However, as me and my family, we grew older, nothing against necessarily Christianity itself, but we've ultimately moved on from regularly going to church on Sundays, and we kind of just moved on to just being our own people, not necessarily associating our identities as Christians. And even I myself, I'll just say that I'm someone who would be considered as agnostic. Like, is there a God up there? Is there an afterlife? Maybe. I just don't know. Like, I'm someone who pretty much accepts that I don't know everything in the world, and maybe there can be some supernatural beings out there, or maybe they're not, and maybe the atheists are actually correct. I mean, either way, there's a lot of possibilities of what the ultimate outcome of life would be. It's just a matter of a wait and see, but that's just my personal take on it. But when it comes to religion in general, personally, I have nothing against people based on their religion alone. Like, if there is someone who identifies as a Christian, or if they identify as any other religion, as a Jew, a Buddhist, a Muslim, or anything like that, I'm perfectly fine with it. I mean, they're all pretty much the same. And being a Christian is not so different than being anything else, honestly. It doesn't matter which God you would go and worship or anything like that. As long as you're using your religion to go and help yourself and you're not doing so in order to go and hurt others, then I'm perfectly cool with it. But that is the line where I would go and draw. When people would go and actually use their religion to actually go and hurt others, that's where I will go and actually criticize them for it, and I will criticize their religion. And that's why I have been openly critical towards the more conservative brand, or especially the more Trump brand of Christianity, because a lot of that is being used in order to enable supremacy and for people to go and force others to tell them what to do, in order for them to go and say that everybody should do things my way. And this is not even to mention about the hate that they would go and enable, that they think that because they're Christians, it's okay to have prejudice and bigotry towards other groups, such as women or people of color, or even especially the LGBTQ plus community, which that does include trans people. And in that regards, that's where I say this is when religion is becoming pretty bad. That's when I would go and say, no, you are a bad person, and the way you use your religion is honestly bad. Because that's honestly the dark reality when it comes to Christianity that not many people are talking about. Because there are many, and I do mean many people out there who are only Christians because they just want to have the benefits of being a Christian than to actually believe in the stories of the Bible and Jesus and stuff like that. You know, there are basically people who think that because they're Christians that they can shield themselves from any accountability or any criticism whatsoever. And this is especially prevalent, and it is the most obvious whenever you see wealthy people who have committed some serious crimes, and they try to use Christianity in order to go and try to avoid accountability, or try to put up that image of like, no, I'm actually a good person who could do nothing wrong. And case in point, take a look at people like Elon Musk or Russell Brand, or literally anybody in the Trump administration. I think those are the biggest proofs of that. And the biggest reason why that's somehow still a thing is mainly because of the idea that all Christians are good people. This has been a thing that's been going on for centuries, where many people somehow believe that just because you have the Christian card, that immediately makes you a good person. That somehow the idea that all good people have to have a faith that they follow. And nowadays we do know better where that's not necessarily true. Just because you're a Christian, that doesn't mean that you're a good person. That doesn't mean that you don't get any accountability for your actions. That doesn't mean that you're free from any consequences that may occur. And that is also the case where just because you're a Christian, that doesn't mean that you're better than anyone else. As long as you're using your Christianity to do some good, to actually help people instead of just hurting them, then in that regards, you're fine there. But if you're going to go and actually hurt others and think that you're better than others, no, that's when it's bad. And it's that brand of Christianity. Why is it that the religion is becoming less and less popular with new generations? Because it's becoming more obvious that that ideology of Christianity and that kind of Christian nationalism is what's really ruining that image, and why there are less people going into the church nowadays, because it doesn't actually have a use in our society. Like, that kind of Christian nationalism is more of a detriment that's actually harming people than it actually is doing good. It's just something that is so obviously filled with corruption and stuff like that. And this is not even to mention about any of the historical context where people would go and use Christianity for a lot of evil actions, and not to mention a lot of things that would technically be considered as sins or against the Ten Commandments and stuff like that, like death, war, greed, corruption, and all that kind of stuff. But to go back into the subject of Angel Studios, this is why, considering that they are more of a Christian nationalist company, more so than an actual Christian company, I feel like they are the mega church of the film industry, where they would go and be all flashy and they're all about the pizzazz of the stories of the Bible and go and present those tales in very extravagant ways, rather it be releasing stories about Jesus or David or any other religious figure, or telling stories about Christians and how they managed to go through their troubles through the power of faith, like really portraying them in big, major spectacle ways. But you don't really see them do much to go and provide to their communities, to go and actually help out people, to go and actually show what good the power of Christianity can actually go and do. In fact, what they do more so than anything is actually enable conservative conspiracies, and that they would go and distribute things that have nothing necessarily to do with Christianity, but it's about spreading propaganda that lean way more not just towards the right, but can go towards the far right, such as the case with stuff like Sound of Freedom or with Tuttle Twins, where at that point, with the kind of financial advice that they would give, you might as well go and tell kids to go and basically rely your finances by going into the casino on a regular basis. So that's why, honestly, I feel like with the way that they use Christianity as an obvious mask, there are some dark secrets that are going on within Angel Studios. And in that regards, that's why I'd rather want to go and completely separate myself, and I don't want to enable them in any way possible in case that something may come out about them where they're a lot more darker than what they may portray. Because the more they try to force out their imagery that they are good Christians, the more that it's pretty clear that who they actually are is kind of the opposite. I mean, maybe I could be wrong, but with their conservatism, with the way that the Harmon brothers would go and enable Angel Studios and the kind of projects that they would release, and not to mention with their stance that I think it's safe to say that they are strong Trump supporters, even when Trump would go and do stupid things such as this, then in that regards, I'd rather want to go and completely separate myself from them altogether and just not talk about any of their projects. Now, by the way, I just want to go and put out a big disclaimer at this point. This is not me trying to tell you what to do, by the way. This is not me saying that you shouldn't be supporting this or we should go and take down Angel Studios or anything like that. If you want to go and watch the Animal Farm movie, or if you want to go and watch any other Angel Studios movie or whatever project they would put out, you're free to go and do so. Like, I have no power to go and make you do something out of my own will. Like, whatever it is, that is ultimately your choice right there. And I won't say anything against it. Like, you do you, ultimately. And also, this is not to say anything against people who would be associated with Angel Studios. Like, if they would make a project that would be distributed with Angel Studios, I have nothing against them either. This is not to go against those kinds of people, honestly. And it's not not against any or most of their movies. Like, again, as long as they're not spreading any delusional conservative conspiracy theory, then honestly, like, I have nothing against those features or any of their projects whatsoever. And especially, I have nothing against those people who are attached to those Angel Studios related projects. And the same goes towards any Christian-related or faith-based projects, whether they be movies, TV shows, and more. Honestly, as long as they're not using it to hurt people, as long as they're not promoting any hate speech, nationalism, segregation, or any corrupted ideologies like that, then honestly, I'm perfectly fine with it. And I know that many of these Christian-related media, they can actually go and make some great stuff. Like, I know that with VeggieTales, it has amassed a great cult following. Like, it has been a fan favorite for decades. And even one of my favorite DreamWorks films is The Prince of Egypt. Like, I actually do have some faith-based movies that I personally enjoy. And also, I think it goes without saying, please do not go and harass anybody who is associated with Angel Studios. I'm just saying we should know better at this point. Please do not go after anybody or antagonize anyone. Rather, if they worked on a project with Angel Studios or if they want to go and watch anything from Angel Studios, please do not go and make any attacks or harassments on social media. I think that is important to go and highlight here. But the whole point of this video right here is just so I go and address why I am against Angel Studios and why I do not want to associate with them whatsoever or make any videos related to Angel Studios. I don't want to go and enable them whatsoever. It's my personal choice. And basically, this is just a way to go and answer the question for anybody who would want to go and ask, well, why don't you go and talk about any of the Angel Studios animated movies that come out? Why don't you review King of Kings or David or the new Animal Farm movie or whatever new animated feature Angel Studios would bring out? Well, this right here is the answer. Hopefully this will go and answer your question. And I mean, at this point, I've definitely talked enough about my stance against Angel Studios. So hopefully we could go and make things clear right there. And, I just want to go and add one more thing that, it's funny because when it comes to Angel Studios, if I would have the choice to go and actually check out their movies and to go and talk about them, I actually do technically have access to do it earlier than anyone else, because over the recent years, I've actually gotten tons of emails from the press of Angel Studios where they would keep asking me to go and actually review whatever stuff they would go and put out, rather it be like David or whatever new season of the Tuttle Twins they would go and release. Technically, I do have access to those where if I want to, I could actually go and actually make an early review of their projects or even have interviews with many of those big names that are attached to those particular projects. However, I just don't care. Whenever I would see those emails, they would immediately go into the junk folder no matter what. I'd rather want to go and stand by my principles and do possibly the worst thing that you could do in any piece of media, and that is to just not talk about it, to just completely disassociate yourself from the media in question and not give it any attention whatsoever. Because I got a very strong feeling that Angel Studios really is the kind of company where they believe that there is no such thing as bad publicity. So in that regards, I'm sure they're excited to see everybody talking about Animal Farm, and even if it would be to go and bash it and to call it the worst animated feature of the year and all that kind of stuff, I'd rather not try to go and add fuel to the fire and provide them with something with what they actually want. Because if it's attention that they want, then at that point, I don't want to give it to them in any other way. Because even if you go and give them negative attention, that's still attention nonetheless. And I mean, that's honestly probably for the best. Why is it that nobody is talking about Sound of Freedom? Because if we do actually talk about the movie in full, then in that regards, we're probably doing more harm, especially for the subject of child trafficking, than actually good. It kind of makes sense why something like even Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey would have more cultural relevance than Sound of Freedom at that point. But I will say that, yes, even though I have no opinion about the new Animal Farm movie, and chances are, yeah, maybe it'll turn out to be absolute garbage. But I will say, though, if you do want to have your animated fix of George Orwell's Animal Farm, then I can recommend you to go and watch the 1954 movie. This thing right here is an underrated classic, and I remember reviewing it a long time ago, and honestly, this movie I find to be absolutely brilliant. Now, I will say, however, yes, there are a few alterations to the story because it is very clear that it was done during the Red Scare, so of course there is a little bit of that propaganda aspect to the feature, but still though, that doesn't change that it is a great film, and I highly recommend you go and check it out. So at this point, you might think that, well, I'm pretty much in a better position where I can move on to go and do better stuff. Well, sadly, that may not be the case, because keep in mind that as it is May 1st, as of the release of this video, keep in mind that the Animal Farm movie is not the only animated feature that came out. There is also a film called Swapped that's being released on Netflix. And considering that one is made by Skydance Animation and produced by some very cringy and problematic people like David Ellison and John Lasseter, I am really not looking forward to that one. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe it could turn out good, but let's just say I don't have high hopes for that one. But anyways, that should do it for this video, and hopefully that will go and answer any questions regarding my stance on Angel Studios. And again, this will probably be the only time that I will ever address Angel Studios, so don't expect me to talk about any of their features anytime soon. But if you guys enjoyed your time here, then consider giving this video a like, and don't forget to go and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. Also, I do have a Patreon, by the way, in which I can guarantee you it is definitely more genuine and legitimate than Angel Studios' Pay It Forward program or their Angel Guild thing. That's pretty much the same thing. So if you want to go and support my work, you could go and join me on Patreon at patreon.com/animat. And with all that said and done, I would like to say thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see you later, dudes.
Look at all this deliciousness! They want this!